Welcome. My name is Joe Davich. I'm the Executive Director here at the Georgia Center for the Book. On behalf of the Georgia Center for the Book and DeKalb County Public Library, welcome you to our continuing series of author talks presented via Zoom. As many of you know, and as many libraries across the nation did, our library system closed on March 15th, and we have moved all of our events to online platforms. So we thank you for joining us this evening and welcoming us into your homes. We hope that you will look at our future programming to see what we have coming up, because we have some very exciting things planned for the fall, and we hope you will join us for as many of those as you can. Just a few examples of those coming up. Of course, we have our fall preview event. This is a very, very exciting event that we've done now for 7 years, where publishing house representatives come to the library and they talk about the great, good, and big books that are due out in the fall. This year we have moved it to Zoom, and we will be doing it at 1 p.m. on August 24th. And as a additive this year, we are doing a fall book preview just for children's and young adult literature the following night, August 25th at 6 p.m. You would register for these on Zoom, and just like we would have done at the library, would we be live, we are going to be doing some giveaways. So when you register for the Zoom event, we do ask that if you live in Fulton and DeKalb counties that you provide us your home address, because we are actually going to be doing little gift bags. And since you can't walk up on the stage and pick your books up, we have decided that what we are going to do is we are going to drop these lovely gift bags off on your porch, filled with some of the books that the representatives will talk about, some books that have already been published, and some books that they haven't talked about in the presentation, but are coming out in the fall. Great surprises, some one-offs as well. As far as the adult book bags, you may find copies of Karen Armstrong's new book, The Lost Scripture, Kevin Kwan's Sex and Vanity, and debut author Stephanie Scott, What's Left of Me Is Yours.
Love that book.
Also some amazing children's literature as well that you may find in these bags. A really interesting mid-grade novel called The Peacekeeper, about a boy in the Iroquois Nation. Nonfiction side, of course, Be Fearless, about the young lady who started a lemonade stand in her own multi-million-dollar business. And a Georgia author who's now living in Switzerland, G.Z. Schmidt, No Ordinary Things, with her new mid-grade debut. So we're going to have a lot of fun things for you in those gift bags. We may consider going a little far afield, but we probably will not be taking gift bag across state lines to Alabama or South Carolina right now. Know that we love you for joining that event, but we may have to figure out a better way to deliver your prize package to you. Also, August 27th, Jocelyn Jackson is continuing her series as part of the Decatur Book Festival. So join the Decatur Book Festival for that. Also, August 28th, we are debuting the Book as Art exhibit. We are doing it online. The artists are actually sending all of their pieces of art to the library. We will set it up just as we would for an in-person event. And we are going to take cameras into the building and film each book live for you to peruse at your leisure. And we will also do a presentation of the winning awards for that evening. Just to let you know, we will also be doing author talks with that on Wednesdays in October. And every Tuesday, there will be a debut video on our YouTube channel where the artist will either read their book or talk you through their bookmaking process. So do join us for those and all the wonderful events we have scheduled for this fall. We're doing some wonderful things with the Decatur Book Festival and movie screenings. So we hope to keep you entertained, even though many of us are still sitting in our homes, and we hope you're sitting in your homes with some great books, not just like the ones we have on our shelves. This is not fake. I have to tell people this one's not fake. This is
actually, that was good. Yeah, I was admiring your backdrop.
Yes. This is the office. There's like some hidden. There's like Easter eggs in here. So if you find some Easter eggs, do let us know. Also, an exciting thing that's coming up for us as well. We are crossing state lines with the South Carolina Center for the Book and doing an On My Mind reading series. And it's going to highlight Georgia and South Carolina authors maybe who set their books in South Carolina, but they live in Georgia, or they live in Georgia and write about South Carolina. But it's a great collaboration that we have coming up. It's going to debut on October 8th with a book that's published by Hub City Writers Project out of Spartanburg, and we're very, very excited about that. Maybe if you all can figure out why we call it the On My Mind series and put it in the chat, I may be able to send you one of these really cool books just for putting your thinking cap on and winning. Anyway, that's what's coming up this fall. But tonight we have Karen White, who is a wonderful Georgia author, New York Times bestselling author, and probably one of the most giving and supportive members of our writing community that we have. She has been moderating events at bookshops all over Georgia. She, of course, was at the Georgia Literary Festival when we hosted it in Augusta and did a bang-up job there. But not only is she an engaging writer, but she's an engaging member of our literary community who is so supportive of new writers, so supportive of people getting their voices out there. And that makes her really one of those great and special people to have as a member of our literary community and on our stage at the Georgia Center for the Book. Of course, you know that her book, All the Ways We Said Goodbye, is out. She has a reprint of The Beach Trees that is in paperback. And of course, if you've read all of Karen's wonderful books, you know that she has one coming out in April called The Last Night in London. We thank you for your support and supporting our independent bookstores. Foxtail Bookshop is our bookseller tonight. So if you'd like to order any of Karen's books, a link has been provided in the chat. If you want to ask any questions following Karen's presentation, feel free to type them in the chat and I will ask them when she's done talking and reading to us. But right now, I would like to welcome Karen White to our wonderful Zoom event. Karen?
Thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. You know, I have to really give my big thanks to the DeKalb Library Foundation, who, when we first started talking, this was going to be a live event, and that was great. And then, you know, became, so thank you, Zoom. Thank you, Georgia Center of the Book, for hosting this and for keeping these events live. I think, you know, while I've been on quarantine, I've been working on a deadline. I have a book due in 2 weeks. And I realize I'm just really, you know, writing is lovely, but the best part about being an author is going out and meeting readers and talking to readers. And yes, I see them online and it's just not the same. And having these virtual events is a pretty close second. So thank you, Zoom, and thank you to, you know, to all the bookstores who have been inviting me and my author friends to engage with our audiences, since we are not allowed to. And it's sad. I mean, not only because, like, today I actually washed my hair and put makeup on and I couldn't remember how to do it because it had been so long. But it really, just knowing that y'all are out there and you're eager to hear me and hear what's going on and know a little bit of the stories, you know, behind the books, that really sort of, it gives me the boost I need to finish the book that I'm working on. And yes, I know the next question you have is, what book are you working on, Karen? I can hear you like, let it be the next Trad Street book. I get that a lot. I do get a lot, and that would be correct. It is the 7th and final book in the Trad Street series. That's not to say that the characters from Trad Street are going away. So this is the book. It is due September 1st. If these characters will ever shut up and just stop so I can finish the book, it will be turned in, and it will actually be out in, we're guessing October of 2021. So yes, I have 2 books out next year. April, the Last Night in London, and then possibly October, this as yet unnamed Trad Street number 7. I do have a working title, but I'm not going to say it in case it changes, because then I'll get a million emails saying, whatever happened to XYZ? Because I've done that before, and people are very, I don't want to say you're easily confused, but I know you wish there were 2 books instead of 1, but there's only so fast that I can type. So yeah, it's running a little bit long, but from what I understand, y'all like them a little bit long. So there you go. And you have to remember, this is the 7th and final book in the series, so there's a lot And I know I hear you shouting, what about Jack and Melanie? Don't worry, that will be resolved, hopefully to your liking. I'm not going to say anything. But there's so many, the characters. In the beginning of the series, book number 1, The House on Trad Street, which came out, believe it or not, 12 years ago in 2008, we had the main character, Sophie. We had her best friend, the main character, Melanie, her best friend, Sophie, who is a professor of historic preservation at the College of Charleston. And we meet Jack, a true crime mystery writer. And Melanie inherits this house on Trad Street in the first book. And that's pretty much the main cast of characters. But now in book 7, we've got their family has grown exponentially, and the relationships, it's all very big. And I don't want to cut it short. I want to make sure that everybody gets their nice little ending, or not so nice ending, depending who the character is. So that's where I am. I'm trying to wrap it up, but it's very complicated, and it is giving me a headache. And so I thank you for this event tonight. This kind of, I can't wait for our Q&A, because I love to hear from you. And that'll sort of like put me in the right frame of mind to go ahead and finish this thing and figure out how it's going to end. Because no, I don't plot my books ahead of time. I kind of have a general idea of what's supposed to happen with absolutely no idea how to get there. So, so this is, yes, you caught me in an ugly period. You should have seen me 2 hours ago with my hair and no. Yeah, it wasn't pretty. So anyway, as Joe was saying, I did have, besides included in my 27 books in that 7-book Trad Street series, I also do collaborations with my 2 writing besties, Beatriz Williams and Lauren Willig. It seems like yesterday, because we actually went on tour in January for this lovely book, All the Ways We Said Goodbye. This is our 3rd collaboration. The first was The Forgotten Room. The second was The Glass Ocean. And if you haven't read them, I know Foxtail has copies. And by the way, if you order your books from Foxtail, they're down the road from me. So I can sign, personalize, write happy birthday, whatever you want. Because all I have to do is, and I'm going by there on Thursday, actually. Whatever you want. But we didn't write these collaborations just so that we could go on a publisher-paid girls trip. Although I will say our book tours are a lot of fun. And the writing with these 2 women, these extremely talented authors, is a lot of fun. But there's something creatively inspiring and sparkling to write a book with 2 other authors. I know people always ask, oh my gosh, so how do you do this? Does one of you like write all your parts and the next one? No, we write round robin. We do meet first, and we do outline. We usually don't outline our own books, as I just admitted, but we do outline these because you have to when you're writing with 2 other people. And when we get together, the sparks fly when we start plotting these books. It's just, there's a lot of respect. We're never talking down somebody or saying, no, that won't work. We build whatever idea one of the authors comes up with, the next author will build on it. And then the way that we choose our characters, it's basically who we gravitate towards. And I must say, writing a collaboration was sort of a leap of faith, and it was a really stepping outside of our comfort zone. And I think whatever career path you have, I think it's important to do something that kind of brings you out of your, especially in a creative job, you need to do something out of the ordinary. And that was one of the reasons why we decided, in a bar, of course, we should do a collaboration. But also, we tend to gravitate towards the characters that are a little bit outside our wheelhouse. Maybe not the typical type of character that we would write in our single title books, which is why very few people can get it right as to who, what, which part, including our editor. Our editor has consistently gotten it wrong. So we think that's an amazing kudos for us, because we each have very strong voices. yet we're able to blend our voices in these books so that they don't read like they're written by 3 different authors. They are read as if it had been written by a single author. And that to us is the biggest, I guess, the biggest compliment, especially when our own editor can't get it right. Oh, before I talk about the next one, I forgot to mention something about Trad Street. So I know I heard the collective groan about the book I'm working on right now, the unnamed book, being the last book in the Trad Street series. Well, the good news is, and sitting, as soon as I'm done here, I'll go and docu-sign it, but I have a contract for 2 new books that are going to be Trad Street spin-offs. Now, that's all I know about this book, is that they're going to be, there's going to be 2, they're going to be back to back. There's not going to be another book written in between, which is going to be kind of hard for me because I like sort of the palate cleansers of my Southern women's fiction and my Trad Street books to kind of, you know, balance my poor brain. So it'll be interesting. And I remember when I was talking to my editor and we were kind of, you know, mentioning, you know, oh yeah, you know, I don't want to write the same, you know, like I found while watching Moonlighting, and also what was that other one with the police detective and the writer. I find once the main characters got together, there was no more conflict. I lost interest. And so I didn't want people to lose interest in Jack and Melanie. So I thought, you know, after leaving them in the last book where everything wasn't all hunky-dory, I think I need to leave them alone so they can have their happily ever afters. But you know what? Like I said, their cast of characters has really grown, and we now have Nola, Jack's daughter, Melanie's stepdaughter, who is an awesome character. I get a lot of fan mail about Nola, and a lot of fan mail saying, oh, she should have her own book. So your wish has been granted. So the next 2 books might just be 2, might be more, depending on if people like them and want more or not. But as I was saying, as I was talking to my editor about, you know, what the spinoffs could be, she said, well, do you think you'll want to set them in Charleston? Now, I adore Charleston. I mean, I love researching there, you know, going to all the restaurants and researching the meals that my characters eat. But not many of you know this, but when I first started thinking about the Trad Street series, it was going to be set in New Orleans. And that was 2005 when I was planning on starting the series, and then Katrina happened. And I knew that the series that I thought about, Katrina was such a main thing. I couldn't put it in the background of the series. It was too major. And I did go back and write a book, which I'll talk about in a minute, that does sort of put New Orleans at the center of the story. And I knew I would go back to New Orleans, but for this series, I knew I had to find another Southern city with lots of great architecture, history, and ghosts. And of course, I came up with New Orleans. So just kind of having this conversation with my editor, I said, well, what about New Orleans? And then the next thing I know, there is an announcement in, I'm not kidding, there's an announcement in Publishers Weekly saying, Karen White has agreed to a 2-book Trad Street spinoff set in New Orleans. And I was like, okay, I guess they're going to be set in New Orleans, which really, again, to research in New Orleans isn't a problem. And what's so lovely is that I went to Tulane, which is in New Orleans. So I lived there for 4 years. I have very dear friends there. I love to visit. So again, not too much of a hardship. And I think we'll still be going back and, you know, a lot of my single title books are set in the Charleston area. So don't worry, for those of you who love the Low Country, you'll get more of that. But now we get to go into a little bit of the craziness that is New Orleans. And I like to call New Orleans sort of Charleston's younger, more tawdry sister. Not tawdry, that's the wrong word. I'm thinking of Bourbon Street, and all of New Orleans isn't Bourbon Street, but you know what I mean. They're very similar, but also very different. So I'm really looking forward to it. And again, researching. So yeah, hang tight. As soon as I'm allowed to travel, I'm sure you're like me, just like, get me out of here. So anyway, so that's all the ways we say goodbye. And this is, it's 3 women that are connected. Well, 3 women. So we have World War I, World War II, and 1960s. And 3 women whose, you don't think they're connected at first, but their stories entwine around a secret involving the Hotel Ritz in Paris. No, we did not get to do research there because our husbands are apparently mean and hateful and wouldn't let us go there for 3 weeks to research, but we'll see. We're working on the next, well, we're supposed to be working on the next book. I'm supposed to be working on the next book, but I can't do that until this other book is done. So, but I will tell you now, it's going to be set in Newport, Rhode Island. And I can't tell you anything more about it because I have nothing to tell you. We have met and we've plotted the book. It's just a matter of, okay, let's get started. It's just hard to start a book when you're trying to finish a book. That's all I'm going to say. So I mentioned New Orleans. My father grew up in the Mississippi Delta. No, excuse me. My mother grew up in the Mississippi Delta. My father grew up on the coast. He actually went to Biloxi High School, and Biloxi is actually where Hurricane Katrina made landfall. So there was, when Katrina happened, I just, I loved this area. I was very familiar with it, and my heart broke. And I really wanted to write a book that talked about surviving storms, not just the physical storms, but also the internal storms that we all go through. And a lot of us are going through right now during this quarantine and people being sick and everything else, this craziness. And so this book was very, very special to me. None of my books write themselves. When you hear authors say, oh, the book practically wrote itself, I'm like, you're lying. Okay. Every book to me is like a knitting needle in the eyeball in a good way. Well, when I type the end, then I'm just like, it's like giving birth for you women out there. It's like, oh my gosh, why did I do this? It hurts. This is terrible, and then the baby's born and you have this beautiful baby and you're like, oh gosh, I can't wait to do it again. Yeah, that's why I have 27 books, because I forget the pain and the agony. Anyway, so this is the book, and it was just re-released in this beautiful, beautiful trade paperback cover. And so it is set in Biloxi, Mississippi and New Orleans around 2 major Category 5 hurricanes. One is Camille, so pre-Camille, which was 1969, and post-Katrina, which was 2005. So we have, again, the interweaving of the 2 stories and the different generations, and a mystery at the core of it. But it's New Orleans, it's storms, and I'm so incredibly proud of this book. I think it might be my bestseller. I've sold quite a few of these. It just resonates with people, and it came out, I think 2010. And it still sells very well. It's a lovely word of mouth book that people like, oh, so if you've never read a Karen White book, start with this one. I think this is a good place to start. And if you can see, so the beech trees are about the story behind them. And where I got the title was that during the storm surge in Biloxi, they used to have these like centuries old oak trees, live oak trees that lined the boulevard. And the storm surge in Biloxi was like 30 feet. And it killed a lot of these gorgeous oak trees, but not all of them. And again, that's sort of a theme in the book, why are some people destroyed by storms, and why are some people made more beautiful? But what I found, one of the most beautiful things that I discovered while researching this book, so many of you might remember Hurricane Andrew. That was early 90s. At that time, it was another Category 5. It devastated a lot of Florida, and a lot of people from the Mississippi and Louisiana Gulf Coast went to Florida with their chainsaws to start, clearing out and whatever. Well, after Katrina, the same thing happened, but people from Florida came to help the people in the Gulf Coast, and it started with just one, and then it grew to more. They're chainsaw artists, and they saw these dead trees that had once been these objects of beauty, and they started carving figures out of them, like fish and dolphins and seabirds, and making these ugly dead trees into these objects of beauty. And that really is a theme of the book, is how, out of such ugliness, beautiful things can be born. And so that's the beech trees. And yes, it's now at a special price for $9.99 USA. And I know that Foxtel, I can get a signed copy for you. Just let them know. And then I guess I don't have a copy of the Last Night in London, because that's another thing. I got my copy it's my galleys, and due 9/1. And I had to remind my editor, hey, I have a book due on 9, can you give me some more time? So they're like, okay, how about 9/8? Okay, who needs sleep, right? You know, no problem. That's all I can say. Thank God for wine. So anyway, a little bit about the last night in London. That has sort of been a book that's been on my mind to write for about 15 years. So for any of you who are my avid fans who've read most of my books, you may be familiar with Falling Home and After the Rain. They are connected. They don't have to be read together, but they are connected. It's set in a fictional small town in Georgia, and it's about a family, an extended family, lots of children, aunts, uncles, cousins, whatever. And I always called those my Steel Magnolias meets Sweet Home Alabama, because it's one of those laugh while you cry books. You know, there's a lot of deep things going on, like a lot of my Southern fiction, deep stuff going on, and then laugh out loud funny things, which I think is what a lot of people appreciate about the Trad Street series, except that also has ghosts. But anyway, I digress. So you may also know that I lived in London for 7 years in a beautiful, beautiful Edwardian building on Regent's Park. And 7 years is a long time. And it really is, it was the longest I lived anywhere until I got married and we moved to Georgia. And I've always been a fan of old architecture. And I remember when we moved in, I noticed how the windows in my bedroom were just plain plate glass instead of lead glass like everybody else's was. And I asked the porter, and he said, oh, during the Blitz, you know, they must have been hit by shrapnel or something and yours were blown out. So they were just replaced with plain glass. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, you know, he's talking about 1941 and 1940, 1940, 41. Isn't that funny? I mean, I just wrote the book and it's crazy, but early 40s during the Blitz, when London was bombarded literally 9 months straight every night. And I was living in that building where people had lived in when that was going on. And I really felt such closeness with history. History was not some dead thing to me. All of a sudden, it was this real living thing. I think that really stimulated my interest in history. And so I always wanted to write a book that was set in that building or at that time or something. And so that's what this book is. The Last Night in London, we see Maddie Warner again. She's a young woman now. She's grown. She's a journalist, a freelance journalist. She's 28. And she is hired by a friend from college when she was junior year abroad at Oxford, an English friend who is now an editor at British Vogue. And they're doing this big museum exhibit about fashion during the war, fashion in an era of crisis. And they've hired Maddie to come interview her friend's great aunt, who is turning 100 and had been a fashion model during the war. And just to sort of get her story and talk about the clothes that will be in the exhibit. And Maddie's like, great. She goes to London to interview. Her name is Precious Dubose, and she's Southern, which is why Arabella, Maddie's friend, thought of Maddie to interview her, because they had this Southern thing in common. And so Maddie starts interviewing her. And of course, it's never as cut as dried, because it's a Karen White book. It can't be. And Maddie starts peeling back the layers of Precious's story and going back to, you know, the war. And we have spies, we have deception, we have love, we have betrayal, and all of those good things. And Maddie learns quite a bit. So I love this book. I loved it. Set in, you know, Precious lives in my building, in my flat, 64 Harley House, and on Regent's Park. And it was just such, I mean, it was hard to write the book. But when I finished it, I was so very, very proud of it. And I can't wait for people to read it and to share this with my readers. So yes, that comes out April. Right now it's scheduled for April 20th of 2021. And hopefully I will be able to go on tour. If not, we will be seeing a lot of each other on Zoom again. So I think I've yammered on a lot. Obviously, let's open it up. I love answering questions to get something specific, and I normally go off on tangents. So ask away anything you want, and if you want to see my dogs, they're throwing themselves against the door. I'm sure I could bring them in. So, Joe.
Excellent.
Oh, there you are.
There I am. Yeah. So we have questions in a few places. So I'm going to try and cover all the bases. And of course, folks, want to see the dogs, are asking, how are Sophie and Quincy doing?
They're doing great. They have no idea there's a virus out there, or a pandemic. They're just like, feed me, play with me, pet me, rub my tummy. So yeah.
Well, speaking of I'm just going to tag in on that last part that you were talking about, living in London and doing research there as well. But someone asked, Luffman, asked if you believed in ghosts. Did that make you?
It's funny. I have had one personal experience in the presence of my son. My son has had 3 very, very solid. He's not, and I was sort of a witness to those, but he seems to be the center of it, and it does not make him happy. We were in a fort in Key West that was supposed to be haunted, and we went into this deep, dark sort of cave where there was no light whatsoever, and a very solid baseball white globe of light went across. And my daughter was with me, my son was with me, we all saw it. That was the first time I had ever personally experienced it. Another time we were in a 14th century castle, and my son and husband witnessed a vase thrown about 12 feet in the air in the room that they were in. So yeah, so I didn't see that, but my husband did. And I heard them screaming, and I run down the stairs as fast as you can, because in a castle, they're like this. And you've heard the expression, it's a cliche, white as a ghost or white as a sheet. That was their color. They were both like, okay, well, I don't know how that happened, but yeah, so.
Well, another interesting thing about your collaboration books is another question is, how did you end up with an English editor?
We don't have an English editor.
Oh.
Rachel Kahn has been our editor for the last 2, because I was with William Morrow. She's a New Yorker. And the Forgotten Room was Cindy Wong, an editor with Penguin, who is actually my editor, and she is American, so English.
There you go.
And they've not yet been translated into English. They've not been sold to the to England yet, so they are not published in England. So
interesting. Well, we have a question too from Barbara asking, how long does it usually take to write a collaboration book, and how are your 2 collaborators doing in quarantine?
Oh boy, yeah, fun question. So we write so much faster with a collaboration. I think it's because we spend 4 days, 3 to 4 solid days of plotting ahead of time. So everything is sort of laid out. So it's not like when I'm writing my own book, I open the computer and it's a blank screen. I have no idea what's supposed to happen next. So when we've already done the hard work ahead of time, you kind of have an outline, and we do it loosely so that we can do our trademark, step out of the box. We don't feel bound by the outline, but it's a nice guide to have. So we write very, very quickly. I think, I want to say our last one was 4 months, which is really incredible. This one's taking longer. And I think it's because we were supposed to meet in Newport in April. We had our plane and hotel and everything so we could do our research and plot the book while we were there and really sort of get a feel for the place. Obviously that did not happen, so we had to do it Zoom. So I think, it just wasn't the same. It wasn't it's going to be a terrific book, but I just didn't feel the joy and the, of the whole process. So this is going to take a little bit longer. It's due in May. So I think that gives us enough time. It should. And it will be out in January of 2022. But yes, there, you know, Lauren, it's been tough. Lauren lives with two little ones, a kindergartner and a preschooler, in an apartment in New York on the Upper East Side. And I think they did not leave that apartment for 9 weeks. And she was on deadline trying to finish the book and, you know, do the virtual schooling for her kindergartner. And I really worried for her sanity points. And then Beatriz, you know, they're doing well. She's in Lyme, Connecticut. Again, she was on deadline, all 4 kids at home, or 5 kids if you want to include her husband, and also losing her mind. So we are desperate to get together again. We keep on sending texts like, oh my gosh, let's just escape. But you know, we're hanging in there, and we're still writing. We're all working on our own projects. So yeah.
Well, actually, speaking of your 2 contributors, we'll just go ahead and tie some questions together. How did you all meet and sort of hatch this scheme? And we have a lot of folks that are complimenting the covers and want to know if you have any input on those. Because shockingly, I know a little bit about that. And you know, authors usually don't have any input whatsoever.
That's how bossy you are and how good your agent is. No. So the first question, how did we decide? So we'd all been sort of stalker fans of each other's. We'd read each other's books. We were all fans of each other. And because our last names start with W, when we would be at like the big writers conferences for the big mass signing, we would always be, you know, near each other. So and then for a time we were all writing with Penguin. So at these big writers conferences, the publishers always have some big cocktail parties. So we would all be at the Penguin party, and we'd always shut it down. They would be like prying the wine glasses out of our hands. And yeah, so after one of these parties, we kind of met at the bar in the lobby, and over a few or more drinks, we were like, you know, we have so much fun together, we should write a book together. I mean, it was totally random. And, you know, we were thinking really the goal was to have our mutual publisher send us on a research tour to a place we wanted to go. So we decided it would be set in Scotland, and we were going to call it 50 Shades of Plaid. And luckily that part didn't stay. But, you know, when we sobered up the next day, we definitely were like, you know what? That's not a bad idea. Let's write. And it was really as easy as that. And then I flew up to New York and met with Lauren and Beatriz, and we just started plotting The Forgotten Room. And we didn't know what we were doing, but within 5 minutes of this magic thing that we had between us, the plotting was just this fluid, wonderful, creative bomb. It was amazing. And it just gets better and better each time we do it. So that's how we met. As for covers, yes, we were in the beginning of Beatriz and Lauren probably different, but in the beginning of my career, I had with a different publisher, I had really crummy covers. But then as you get, you know, as you climb the career ladder a little bit, you do have a say. Some book covers they give you, and you know, there's just a little bit of tweaking, like this one here. This is Dreams of Falling. This is pretty much what they showed me, and I loved it. It was perfect the first time. The Beach Trees, this is their 3rd rendition. I wish they'd given me this cover with the first one. I was not a fan of the first one in 2010. And this one, I believe this is the first cover they sent us, except the woman was different, and she was wearing like the wrong clothes. And so we picked the clothes and the color, and then it was perfect. So those were minor things. Okay, so the Last Night in London, though, I mean, like 50 covers that were all wrong. I was almost in tears. And then, I mean, their team is so talented. And then the art department sent me the cover, and I wish I do have it. And I wept. It was just like, oh my gosh, it was worth the torture of the 50. So at this point, I do have cover say. They're not going to put something on one of my books if I don't okay it. So it can be a process, but you have to fight for it and don't. I think they try to break you down, but it just depends on how annoying you are and you know, how stubborn. But I was going to show you, go on, go ahead, Joe, but I was going to show a picture of the new cover because it's so pretty.
Oh, sure. Let's go. We have some questions about some of your other titles too.
Okay.
Like the inspiration for your book, All the Ways We Said Goodbye. And we also have a question from Audrey who asks, did you have any experience with beekeeping before writing Flight Patterns, or did you learn as you wrote?
Okay, I'll answer the first one. Our inspiration for this is we're all history buffs. And we want to, you know, as a history buff and as a writer, an historic fiction writer, you want to write about really, really volatile periods in history. France in World War I and World War II were very volatile, as were the 1960s. And so and then, you know, come on, the Paris Ritz, we did have visions of going there, and sadly that never happened. And that may have played a part in us picking that location. But for Flight Patterns, no, sorry, I'm just pulling up this cover. For Flight Patterns, I didn't know anything about bees. And I have to say, I mean, now I am, everything in that book that are the headers, like about the sex lives of bees and all that, they're all true. And I did that research, and I spent an afternoon with a beekeeper. I suited up, she you know, did all the stuff, and I was fascinated. And the idea for the beekeeping came from while I was thinking about the book. I was at a restaurant, and their motif, like on their sign outside and on their menus, was a honeybee. And I don't know why that stuck with me, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I started reading a little bit, just Googling. And the first thing I came across was the sex lives of bees. And I was like, okay, this is fascinating. This can't be real. And it was. And I thought, okay, well, this will be a fascinating part of a book, because it's a matriarchal society. I was writing about a mother and her daughters, and I just thought, yeah, this is it. So, and now I'm in love with bees, and don't ever, ever, ever kill one. They don't want to sting you any more than you want to be stung by, and they will die if they sting you. And every worker bee that you see out there, remember, is a female. So she is a she. Just, yeah. So, you know, worker bees, the guy bees, they just hang out. They're fatter. They don't have a sting, so they can't defend anybody. They're fatter. They just hang out at the hive. They wait to mate with the queen bee on the one time she flies out of the hive. And if they are lucky enough to mate with the queen bee, their falls off after the act and they die. So again, how can you not read that and think, I've got a book here? Maybe it's the author in me, I don't know, but sorry.
Excellent. So there's a couple writing questions that I want to get to from Tim and Andy. So I'm going to sort of like mash them together. And Tim wants to know, what of all of your books that you have written are you considering a sequel or a prequel? And Andy asks, what drew you to telling so many of your stories using rotating narrators and time frames?
Okay. So right now I have absolutely no plans to do prequels or sequels. You know, writing 7 books in a single series, there are advantages, but there's definitely disadvantages. And now that I'm on the 7th book, I'm seeing what the disadvantages are. So I have absolutely no desire. And again, you know, I was going to show you the cover for The Last Night in London. So you remember, it's kind of a sequel because first of all, we have Precious, who is in All the Ways We Said Goodbye, as a main character in here. And then we have Maddie from Following Him and After the Rain. So not really, I mean, the stories aren't related, but the characters are. So you might enjoy that. But, you know, and again, I might be pulling characters from but I really have no desire to do a prequel or sequel unless it's an actual series and I know it's a series. Because I try to let my characters kind of ride off into the sunset because I normally torture them through the pages. And then, I'm sorry, what was the second part of that?
Oh, about writing your books with multiple narrators and timeframes?
You know, and it's funny because I tell Lauren Willig this all the time. My first book of hers that I read was the Secret History of the Pink Carnation. And in it, she did that. She's the main character, Eloise, is a PhD candidate, and she's writing, doing her dissertation on sort of a Scarlet Pimpernel type a Napoleonic era spy. And she went back and forth in time. And I thought, oh, that is the coolest thing. I loved it. And at the time, I was wanting to do a time travel. I love time travel books. I mean, Outlander, anybody? And actually my very first book, the In the Shadow of the Moon, set in Roswell, Georgia, was a time travel. And a lot of people loved that book. It was republished a few years ago. And I was and I mentioned it to my editor. She's like, no, you're not writing a time travel. That's just, nobody's buying that unless your name is Diana Gabaldon. Nobody's buying that anymore. And it's just not something that your readership would go along with, and kind of hurt my feelings, but I was like, okay. And then I remembered how Lauren had written her book. And I thought, well, you know what? This is kind of a way to do time travel, because you're going back in time, but you're just doing it from different narrative. It's not, there's no science fiction involved. You just plop your characters in a different time period. So that was the first time. And now so many people are doing that. I'm probably going to do less of it. But you know, sometimes I don't have a choice. If I'm writing the book and that's the way it comes to me, that's the way it comes to me, and that's how I feel compelled to write it.
So there's several questions about the Trad Street books. So I'm been kind of hunting and pecking because I don't want spoilers.
Okay.
So
okay. No.
There's folks, if you're asking questions, don't do spoilers. Don't be that
Don't
reader.
be that. Yeah. Don't be that person.
But so I'm going to go ahead and ask these. If they are, we can just, you know, we're not going to play. We're just going to pass. So,
Okay.
you know, pass. So there is one. What are the three you're plotting next? Will it continue some of the characters we've seen in the previous collaborations? Will Prunella get a book deal? And also, how do you get to the point with Melody and Jack in Christmas on Trad Street? I'm looking forward to the next in the series, but man, the end of that one was devastating.
Yes. Okay.
See, that was close to a spoiler.
A little bit, but
that's like almost like a line call. That's close. That's close.
Okay. So going back to Prunella. So Prunella is the character that Beatriz, Lauren, and I cannot kill. We have tried. She survived Lusitania. She's happy to announce in all the ways we said goodbye. She's sitting, typing her memoirs in the lobby of the Ritz. We have tried to kill her. She just keeps showing up. And we realize that she is also going to show up in the Newport book. So Prunella will never die. She is just, yeah. Will she get a book deal? I don't know. Let me ask Beatrice Lauren if we think she deserves a book deal. I'm having doubts because she's just not a very nice person. And then, yeah. So in the next two tragedy books, so the main character will be Nola. That's really as far as I've gotten. I did create a new character in the book I'm working on right now who will definitely be in the next one, but you haven't met him yet. He's still on my computer, but his name is Bo Ryan, and he has a very interesting background. So we'll find out more about him. And I think we're going to have some visits from, you know, maybe Jack goes on book tour in New Orleans. You know, they're great bookstores in New Orleans. And so we get to see Jack and Melanie, you know, have drop-in appearances. And I think Dr. Sophie Wallin-Orossi, the crazy best friend of Melanie with the crazy hair and fashion sense, I think she has a cousin who teaches at Tulane. So I think we're going to see, you know, don't worry, I'm not going to just drop in a whole bunch of new people. But of course we have Nola. And don't forget Nola's little sister, who will be, I don't see, again, I'm very careful when I write Trad Street not to label them with a date, because the next book might be 2 years later, but the actual time that has passed might only be 6 months, which is the case with this. Actually, the book I'm working on right now takes place the same month that Christmas on Trad Street ends. So, so you have to be real careful with that. But I think her little sister will be old enough. You remember, and her little sister has the gift. I think her little sister, Sarah, will be old enough to come visit big sister Nola in New Orleans, and things will happen. That's all I know. I mean, really, I can't plot more than one book at a time. It's hard enough doing one. My poor brain.
So a few more questions about the Trad Street books. Lori asks, can they be read as a standalone, or do you need to start with book one? And Kelly is asking, is there going to be a possibility of a Trad Street weekend again for the next release?
So for the first question, I do write, each book has its own mystery that it's pretty much, the main mystery is solved in each book. So in that respect, they can be read on their own. However, the real joy of the series, and I think if you ask any of the fans of the series, they will tell you the same thing. The real joy of the character of the series is the characters, and when you meet them, and then each book see how they grow and change, and how the list of cast of characters expands, and why they expand, and how they're related. That is the real joy. I mean, these aren't paranormal or science fiction books. These are still Southern women's fiction books, with sort of the side thing of, the main character sees dead people. So it's always about the character. These are very character-driven books, and that's why I strongly suggest that you do read them in order. And the first book is The House on Trad Street. And if you want to get the printable list of them in order, you can go to my website, karen-white.com. And then the other question, what was the second part of that question? I had a good answer for it. I just don't remember what it was.
Oh, it's, will there be a Trad Street weekend?
Oh, right. So I've already talked to Polly Buxton, who owns the amazing Buxton Bookshop in Charleston, right there on King Street. And she was like, you have a book out, we'll do the weekend. I guess, and since the book isn't supposed to be out until next fall, please, Rona, go away. Hopefully by then, this virus situation will be done. We'll be able to do it. But, and hopefully our bookstores will survive. Y'all, it's so important that they do. They are such important parts of our community. They put books in readers' hands, as do libraries. And like any small business, they are struggling. So any kind of support you can give them is really welcome. So if Buxton Bookstore is there and they're willing, I hope it can happen. So stay tuned. Make sure you sign up for my newsletter, karen-white.com. Click sign up for my newsletter.
So here's a couple on writing. And someone has asked, having taught writing classes, how do you manage to keep several novels going through the writing process at the same time?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. And I have to say, and I think it's because of this whole virus thing, and just, there's a lot of things going on in my private life right now that have really been interrupting my train of thought, which is why I have not been able to start the next collaboration. Luckily we have time, and Beatriz and Lauren are patient. And I told them, as soon as I'm done with this, September 1st, I'm going to dig right into the next one. Because normally I don't have a problem with it. And I am right now. I'm finding it very hard to focus on one project, much less two. But I think it's because what I write, and I think I mentioned earlier about having a palate cleanser in between, because my Trad Street series are so much different from my collaborations, are so much different from my single titles, so that it's sort of easy to switch because you're in a completely different world. And that kind of helped keep it straight in my head. Right now, nothing's being kept straight in my head. I'm losing my mind. So I think that this book, I love what's happened. I love how this book is coming along, but it has been a real struggle. And I think a lot of, I read on Twitter, a lot of writers, oh my gosh, all this free time, I'm just been like the most productive writer. I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's like climbing uphill, with every paragraph, but it'll be worth it. I've got 2 more weeks to go, waking up really, really early and going to bed really, really late, but it'll be worth it. It will. It has to.
Very, very true. So I'm going to combine a couple questions. Because you're a history buff and you know, you enjoy getting to that little minutia kind of stuff, and you know, working in a library, sometimes we find some great little hidden gems of things. But one of the participants asked about city directories and phone books, you know, and how, you know, I remember one time we had, oh, what was his name? Was it Ron? It was Ron Rash.
Okay.
And when he was writing, it was before Straight, maybe it was like World Made Straight, but he ordered a bunch of old Sears and Roebuck catalogs.
Yes, yes.
Ordered to get, you know, what were advertisements like in the 30s? What kind of things were available, and how did they use the language and the advertisements for that? So, I mean, do you find yourself maybe looking at city directories for characters, for streets, things like that? And, you know, of your characters, you know, have you created a character based on someone you know, or, you know, do you try and not do that, where, you know, the characters are more historically based, where people can't recognize themselves easily in your novels?
Right. So first question, yes, I have bought Sears Roebuck catalogs. And it's funny because you can actually find reprints of them now. That is amazing to see what things cost, what they were wearing, how it's described, especially for, like for the Glass Ocean, because I had never written that time period before. And so, you know, we're talking Lusitania 1915, yes. And I had no idea what, you know, what that stuff was. And that was hugely helpful. Diaries. There's a lot of published diaries from people of that era, which is incredible, especially Charleston, because I write so much about Charleston. I have a lot of like, what are they called? Primary sources for that kind of thing, just to really immerse yourself, because, you know, we tend to look at history with 2020 eyeglasses on. And you have to understand, it was different back then, you know, good and bad. People did not see and think the way that we do now, all these years ahead. You know, we've learned, we've grown, we've changed quite a bit. Mostly for the best part. We still have, you know, a ways to go, but so you have to understand that. And the only way to understand that is to read primary sources. How did they, how did they talk? What words did they use? How did they describe certain things? And really the best way to do is primary sources. And I'm trying to, because my bookshelves are here. Oh, I can't even. Oh, I know from my World War II books, I've bought a housekeeping manual for housewives in the 1940s. I mean, it's just brilliant stuff that you'd never guess. And it was hard. Life was hard back then. And then the other question, dang it, see what my brain, do you see my brain? It's terrible.
Understand. No, it's about creating your characters. Have you based characters?
Right, yeah. So I try not to. When I do, I make sure I disguise them so they don't recognize themselves. But then I realize most people don't, if they're not a nice character, they don't recognize themselves anyway. I cannot help but to have noticed, certain characteristics of people, friends, acquaintances, neighbors, whatever. And I'm not intentionally, but I'm sure I have used those characteristics. But I haven't taken a real person and just put them somewhere, except for my brother-in-law, Rich Cobelt, because we are big practical jokers in my family. I decided I put him in the first book, The House on Trad Street, and his name has pretty much shown up in every single book I've written. But in the Trad Street series, he is the handyman / plumber whose pants always hang a little too low in the back. And so, yeah. He thinks it's a hoot. I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think he'd be okay with it. And he's so proud of it. I mean, he's like, I'm famous.
Oh, that is too funny. Well, speaking of characters, and before we get to the last few questions and things like that, so of your characters, or maybe minor characters, maybe even a plot line that you've had, are there any darlings that you've had to kill that you've either held in reserve, hoping to resurrect them at some point, or have you morphed them into other people, or do you just let those go? Just, it's a darling that I have to kill, And I as a writer, I just have to get over it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I'm one of these, cut and move on people, because I got too much else going on. I can't live in the past. I can't resurrect the dead. So I let it go. I'm not one who mourns characters or plot ideas or whatever. I just kind of take the next thing and go with it. Oh, I can't hear you. Joe, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Oops, sorry, I did that too fast.
Okay.
But kind of like dovetailing with the Kill Your Darlings, what is the favorite of all of your novels? Oh, Sally, that's like asking favorite children, but
It is,
we're
exactly.
going to go with it. Or does anyone have any particular special meaning to you?
I hate to say this, because I get as much love mail as I get about Melanie Middleton in my Trad Street series. I also they're like, oh, she's such an unlikable character, but then they read all 6 books in the series. So, I mean, there's something to say about that. I'm not one of these readers who has to read about a likable character. All I ask is that you give me a character, and regardless of how they're acting, whether I agree with it or not, as long as I understand why. And so that's why I love Melanie. She was abandoned by her mother at age 6 and raised by an alcoholic father. She basically had to mother her father at a very young age. She knew how to force aspirin down his throat, when he came home drunk, and get herself ready for school in the morning, at 1st grade. And so that's why she's sort of like uber controlling and not very trusting. And you don't just get over that. She's 40 years old before she starts sort of letting go a little bit. You can't go for 40 years and like just overnight go, oh, okay, I feel better now, we're fine. So I love her because she struggles, but she doesn't give up. And I think because I have been with this character now for 7 books, so we're talking 12 years, or actually since I started writing it like around 2005 and it came out in 2000. So 15 years I've been with this character. I can't even believe it. And even though like only 2 years has passed in the series, but I've really grown to love her. And a lot of people who know me and know the books, they think that Melanie is me, and not really. There's a lot about her. Like the thing that I think I recognize about myself and her is that on the outside, she's this very successful, confident woman, and strong woman, but inside she's jello. She is just so insecure. And I think, myself, I'm like that a lot. I don't, I might come off as a real confident person, but that's only because I've worked at it for a number of years. That's not who I am naturally. And so I love that about her. And I love her sense of humor. I know I do not see ghosts, but yeah, so I say Melanie is probably the character that means the most. As far as books, again, they're all like my children. I have 4 children, including the 2 dogs. They're all special to me for different reasons. Like usually the one that's most the one I hate the most is usually the one I'm currently working on because it's torturing me. And the one I love the most is the one that came out last because it's done. It's my new baby. And the one that's ready to go. And that's The Last Night in London. So that one, I'm extremely proud of it. And like I said, I can't wait for everybody to read it.
Excellent. Well, speaking about reading books, don't forget, if you want to order any of Karen's books, the link has been put in the chat. We'll make sure when we post this, we also post the link for Foxtails Bookshop in Woodstock. Karen and Jackie are just absolutely fabulous ladies and truly the best of all foxes. Gary's in another category of fox, yes, but we love Gary up there nonetheless. He does a fantastic job as well. But, like so many of our independent bookstores, during these events, they have been really digging in, doing mail order, porch delivery for folks. And, if you don't have the availability to get to one of our independent bookstores here, please shop at any of your local independent bookstores. We also encourage you to shop at any Black-owned business because they are just as important as well, and really the cornerstones of the community too. We've worked with Foxtails for years, and they dig into some great folks
Yep, they do.
when they do events. So, and then, when you may have time, go to their store. It's a lovely, lovely little shop. I've seen it with some amazing displays, and it looks absolutely gorgeous during the holiday time. They take a lot of pride in that as well.
Yeah.
Since Karen's going to be there on Thursday, do get those orders in before then so she can sign away and, go home with a little bit of like author carpal tunnel.
Yes.
So
I'm on my way to visit my dad, so I go right by Foxtail. So I will spend as much time as they say I need to be there. So get your orders in early so I know how much time to spend.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. It's been such a wonderful evening spending time with you and coming into your little writing area and coming into our homes. And, we wish you much success in the future. And we can't wait to read more of your books.
Thank you. And I can't wait to see people in person again. So thank you for hosting. This has been lovely. And thank you, everybody, for showing up tonight. Appreciate it. And hope to see you on the road. If not, I'll see you on the screen.
Excellent. Thank you so much again, Karen. Everyone, have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you at another event very, very soon.
Great. Thank you. Good night, everyone.